Welcome back. This video is a part of my Stockfish Teaches series, and we are exploring the openings and the opening moves of the black pieces. My previous video, we went over the first three moves and which situations that you need to bring out the pieces in what sequence and everything. And the first line is the Italian line, which goes like this. That's the Italian. And then we respond with a two knights defense. And the most common response from here on white, at least below 2000, is the knight attack, the fried liver attack. And here we do this. And this is known as the Polario defense. And this knight move is very difficult for people to find. Uh, most of the time, it's just like, oh, maybe we'll just take here or whatever. But yeah, it's not an easy move to find, and it's the best chances for black, and the most likely that white will mess up. So the best response for white is the bishop check line, and where we just trade off a couple of pawns, and then the best move for white here is just to move the bishop back over to d3. And then from there, we just move uh, the knight to the middle of the board there. And uh, their best move, since their knight is being under attack by the queen, they need to move the knight to a safer square, and they'll bring it to f3, most likely. Otherwise, it's probably going to be a blunder if they don't do it to f3 or h3. Um, so f3 is pretty much their best move. They can move there because the bishop protects that e4 square, so you can't push the pawn to either deliver a fork or attack the knight again. So that was the best response there. And then you can just bring out the bishop to protect this pawn because that pawn is not defended. Um, so now it would be. So you have everything defended, and you survive the fried liver attack. And now you just play your game the best you can. And if we come across these lines, which I wouldn't expect below 2000, or at least not below 1500, that you probably wouldn't get too far into these lines. Um, I would say especially under 1500, but we'll see. If we start seeing it a lot, uh, I'll make another video that goes even further and maybe show better ways that we can punish even the better lines. But uh, white would have to be very careful uh, because just the slightest move and they could be down significant amount um, of material, get into trouble. So anyways, let's move on to the next line. So the most common response to this below 2000 is actually to move the bishop back. And like, if I didn't know any better, I probably would do the same thing, because you want to keep pressure on the pawn, create a pin. Life is good, but it's not very good for white. Anyways, you just attack the knight right away, and the best move here would be for the knight to go over to that h3 square, because if they move over here, they just get kicked again with that pawn. So it doesn't really seem natural to go out to uh, take your knight to the rim because they say knights on the rim is very grim, and uh, and it's no different from this for this. And you actually have a pretty cool move here that I like and would make white extremely uncomfortable, and that is to first attack the queen. White White's only move really is to block with a pawn, and then now you would take the knight there, and they have a really awful pawn structure. The king is pretty much out in the open, and just look at their position. They don't have really any of their pieces out. It's all stuck in the back rank here, and you got a vulnerable king. So from here, it should be pretty easy to convert. Um, you can think about moving the queen up here to attack that and try and attack maybe somewhere along the diagonal, or bring the queen out here, deliver another check, gobble up some pawns, um, oops, and just really put pressure on the king. So just keep that in mind for that line. And then we move on to this next line. So, whoops, I already gave away the position. But anyways, get the initial setup, bishop check line, and then they bring out the queen. And because if you take, they can take your rook, um, and then you would bring out the queen up here. It's okay for white, or it's okay for black, but um, I feel like it's a little bit easier to mess up on. And with that, there's a lot more opportunities for white to get ahead. They have a lot more moves where they won't mess up with. But if you move the rook over, they pretty much only have like one move. Otherwise, they um, they make a blunder, and they most likely will make a blunder in this scenario because they look at it like, okay, my bishop is under attack. They're attacking the square twice. They're going to be one pawn ahead if they just take. And granted, I would probably think the same thing. It's like, okay, calculations. Okay, I win a pawn. No big deal. And that's actually a bit of a mistake. So you just recapture the bishop, they recapture, and then you block that check with your knight, while simultaneously attacking their knight. And they really don't like this position is like good for black. I mean, hands down. And I think black has a lot of ideas that they can employ depending on how white moves. So I kind of like setting up that little, I would say it's kind of like a little trap to get them in a bad position. Um, so I like it. I'll probably go with this variation in the future because it just seems easy, easier, less complicated, and that's what I'm really going for. I really want to make it easy, simple, things that I just know I can do, and I'll probably explore some of these different positions a little bit more to figure out like, okay, what positions can we get into where white has to play super perfect or else they end up making a mistake. Like pretty much like this position. So anyways, we move on to the next position. Whoops. And I think I already gave it away too. But it's the bishop check line again. And then they move the bishop instead of to the best square. Here, they move it back to E2. And we explored like what happens if they move it back. They pretty much need to move the bishop back, um, because otherwise you just take a bishop. And so they'll probably move it here, here, or here. And I don't think they'll take it all the way back, because who would want to take it all the way back, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So so this is going to be the most common responses. So anyways, you just attack the knight again in this one. They move it back because they can't move it to the F3 square, because you just immediately can attack it again. And so they move it back to the H3 square. And then you would just pull the bishop out here and just kind of go along with the game. So we'll see if we get any of these positions. I don't really expect to make it this far into any of my games, especially below 1,000. But um, but it's kind of like the beginning of theory, and knowing what moves to play without really putting in a whole lot of mental energy in finding the best moves, especially in the first few moves. Um, but we're not over. We got one more variation that I would like to go over. And this is, what if they just take with the bishop? Um, that can't be too bad, but it really is if you play it right. And we're going to be playing it right if they go in this direction. So they take with the bishop, capture with the knight. They take the knight while at the same time attacking this knight. It's usually a common tactic that you can employ in many games. Um, Capture and immediately put pressure on another piece. But we just ignore that piece. We capture um, their knight, and they will say, okay, another knight for me. But that is incorrect. And you just take that pawn while threatening taking that rook. And they might freak out a little bit. They might think they're perfectly safe. They move their rook out. Don't just immediately grab that pawn. Put more pressure. We want more pressure, and threatening mate in one or mate in two. Um, so right here, this should be easily winnable for pretty much just about anybody. And that's just from them taking with the bishop rather than with the pawn. They get themselves into a massive amount of trouble right away, and you're in an awesome position. So just try to enjoy it, and hopefully you can get into the like a position like this. I'm really hoping that in one of my games I can get into this and then show everybody, like, hey, look, I got into this position. It was great, and I mated them on the next turn. They, they probably won't get mated. They'll probably defend. And the next best move is a simple one where you just take the pawn, capture the other one, and go from there. There's pretty much all sorts of moves that you can do that is pretty much winning. Like just about anything that they can throw at you right here, um, you can easily respond. So we'll just have to hope to get these positions. And anyhow, thank you for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one. Thank you. Take care.